Okay. So the next thing I want to do with you is an exercise. And that is, we talked about weights, criteria weights. And Decision Lens has a tool to gather the weights. We call it a pairwise process or AHP, analytical hierarchy process. It's a comparison tool. It allows you to set weights by comparing criteria against each other. And we can do it in a big group setting like this. This is an activity that TXDOT went through with, I think, about 100 people across the state, where they set the weights in your model, or in a model for the parent criteria, the relative weights, the importance, right? And that's provided to you in every Decision Lens model that's generated, but it's not one that you have to use. It's there for reference. What we see is that MPOs and districts that are doing a prioritization may want to set those weights with a different stakeholder group every time, maybe once, and this is a way that we can go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to have everyone here and everyone on the phone is going to participate in this. I've set up a model. It's a little bit simplified model. So bear with me for just a moment. Actually, what I'd like you to do is click on the Decision Lens logo at the top left, which takes you back to your home page. And I want you to hang out here for just a minute, because as I set this up, you're going to see something pop up there. Let me just... Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have everyone set weights for what you think is important for this criteria set. And the first thing I'd like you to do is take out a pen and a piece of paper or your folder, whichever you'd like. And the people on the WebEx can do this as well. And what we're going to do here is I want you to write down these 6, you can shorthand this, these 6 criteria, because this is what we're going to be doing. Safety, preservation, congestion reduction, connectivity, economic development, and environment. I'm not going to be checking your work, so you can write it down however you'd like. Now, this process that we're going to be going through is going to have you set the weights for these. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now is I want you to, next to each one of these, is write down what you think the importance is for each of these weights, and it needs to add up to 100. So there's 6 of them, pretty simple math. I want you to give each one of these a weight. So if you were to say that safety is 50%, that means that everything else, all you have is 50% to work with. There's no right or wrong answer here, and it's very specific to your job and your region and your district and where you live, and that's kind of the whole point. So go ahead and do that. Write that down. People on the phone, you can do this as well. And the reason I'm doing this is because I kind of want to see, well, 2 things. I want to see how close you get to what you think these weights are, if you were to do it this way, to what you come up with when you actually do the pairwise process. And the second is because you can't leave until you all actually come up with a number together. So go ahead and work. No, I'm just kidding. You're not going to have to do that. Because I'm going to do that for you, okay? That's kind of the whole point of this. I'm going to actually go through that process so that we can come up with a group number without you having to talk amongst yourselves, because that would take quite a while. Okay. So everyone has that written down. I want you to follow, just watch what I'm going to be doing, because this is how you would go ahead and do a priorities collection for your model if you were to go through it. Under Collect Priorities, this is our priorities collection area. And I think there's a little bit of wait in here because I've already been doing this. But the way that this works is you essentially turn this on and let people go through it. There's two ways that we typically do this. One is a group setting like this, right? You get everyone in a room. You say, here are my criteria. This is what I want everyone to evaluate. This is what they mean, how they impact stuff. And we're going to do this right now, and then we're going to look at the results. That's what we're going to be doing today. The other way is you hold a meeting, you go through the criteria and the definitions, and you say, at the end of today, I'm going to open this up. You're going to get an email, and please complete it by the end of day Friday. And then you let people go through it on their own. Either way works. But for today, we're doing it in a classroom setting, so it works pretty well. So what I do is I set this up. I do priority setting. I set it up. I give some instructions. I can attach a document. Maybe I have an outline that explains my process, my portfolio, and what these criteria mean and what they do. The next one is comments. I can allow people to actually comment on a prioritization if I wanted to collect comments. Maybe someone says, I don't think that SCID should be part of this particular portfolio. That makes absolutely no sense, as an example. And someone could comment on that if they'd like. The next is reviewing all of the people that are set up here. Does anyone remember the permission that allows someone to actually participate in something like this? Voting. Voting owner, voting reviewer, voter. Those are the permissions that you would set up ahead of time. And once that's done, I would click Start. Now, I'm going to send this email out to everyone. It's going to send an email with a link to go in here. But for everyone here that's already in the Decision Lens homepage, you're going to see a task show up at the top. Same thing with the people on the WebEx. Pretty sure I caught everyone. So once I send this out, you're going to get a link to actually do that. So that's done. That's open. And you should see something at the top that shows up like this, My Tasks. And it says, Establish Priorities for the portfolio titled Criteria Prioritization 215. So go ahead and click on that. So what I want to show you is how this works, and then I'll let you actually go through this. Yours probably says Start. Mine says Continue because I already started. But what you're given is it's asking you to evaluate the criteria. When you look at this, you're doing two at a time, only two, and then you move on to the next two. And you're answering two questions. Which one is more important, and how much more important is it? So in this first question for me, it says, which is more important, safety or congestion reduction? I'm going to say that safety is strongly more important than congestion reduction. I'm going to click on that, strong under safety, and I'm going to click Next and continue to go through. So you're going to be doing paired comparisons for all of the criteria, the 6 criteria, and mathematically the weight is going to be generated. So there's no evaluation, there's no voodoo. It's really just a calculation, very scientific. But it's easier to do comparisons on 2 things than it is on 6, 8, or 10. So go ahead and take 4 or 5 minutes and do that. And as you're doing that, I'm going to watch your progress on the screen. I'll show you what that looks like. It's kind of fun once this loads. Oops. Okay. So I can track everyone's progress here. So go ahead and continue to do that. I'm going to turn myself off. Participants. And same thing on the phone. If you are at your computer and you can go through that process, please do. Okay. If this was a race, Frank would be in the lead, but it's not a race. And when you get to the end for Ashley, Frank, Judith, and Kent, you'll see that you can actually see your results. It'll say you can see your results. You can click on that and see what that looks like. Wow, people are fast. That's great. And I promise after this we'll take a break. All right, it looks like we're just about done. There's 2 people finishing up. So as an owner of this portfolio, I can see the progress of the participants. This would be useful both in class, mostly what we call AYC, or at your convenience, right? If you were to open this up for people to do on their own, I could check and it would give me a good indication of who I need to call, right? I can see people that haven't done it, but it's likely that these are people that aren't on the WebEx. It looks like everyone is done. Everyone that started has completed. That's pretty awesome. So with that being said, I can go ahead and look at the group results here. So as a group, congratulations, you've all come up to a conclusion together, collaboratively. I love it. Safety is the highest, 36%, followed by congestion reduction, and then preservation, connectivity, environment, and economic development. So who's surprised by this result? Anyone? Do you understand how we got to this number? And by the way, that was a lot of people. That was probably close to 30-some plus people. We just came to a conclusion as a group in 5 minutes. Does anyone not agree with this? If we were to say, this is what we're using to go forward with our setting our projects based on this. Sounds good? Fantastic. Okay.
Do you agree with it?
Do you agree with it?
Yeah.
You don't have to.
I'm thinking Tempo needs to use this. Part of that Cat 2 discussion they said.
That would be a good case for it.
Right. So there's a couple things I want to show you on this. First, I am going to ask for a volunteer who wants to share what they wrote down as their percentages, and I'm actually I can pull up your name here and filter this to be just you. There's no right or wrong answer here, so it's not a big deal. Does anyone want to share with the group what you wrote down?
We have a volunteer in the back.
Do we have a voluntold? Okay.
Can you identify who got the closest to?
We got
So, I do want to point out that this isn't a right answer.
Right.
This is a group answer.
Mildred.
Mildred, okay. So I'm going to scroll down on the left here and pull up Mildred. So I'm going to check on Mildred's name, and this will show me what the weights are based on just Mildred. So how does this jive with what you have?
Ish. I had pairs. I had ranked 2 equal each time.
Oh, okay.
Brainstorming.
Okay. Were they close? Did you have safety and congestion at the top?
They were even. They were my 1 and 2.
Okay. And then connectivity and preservation?
Preservation. Yes, I had them equal as 3 and 4.
Okay. So it's a similar order.
Mm-hmm.
There's no right or wrong answer for which one is more accurate. It's just 2 ways of approaching the same problem. 6 criteria, it's a little bit more manageable, right? 100 divided by 6, not too bad. But as you start growing the number of criteria that you have, it becomes a little bit more complex. If you get to the point where you want people to rate or to weight the criteria at all of the different levels, just to give you an idea, you're not weighting each criterion against every level of your tree. It's at each specific level. So all the parents are done together, and then the children under that, and then the children under that. So if you had preservation and you had bridge and pavement, it would be bridge versus pavement, and then within bridge, if there were 2, it'd be those 2, and then everything kind of rolls up. So thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. Yes?
I was going to say it's also important to define each of those criteria
Yes.
very clearly.
That's a very excellent point.
Does congestion reduction have a component of safety?
That's right.
So you don't want to make, I don't know. Yes, you don't want to double count or assume that if we reduce congestion, then there's no shock wave that can cause secondary incidents or...
Yeah. I'm going to repeat that because that's a very good point. So what was mentioned was the definition of the criteria. And that is extremely important because what ends up happening is if you go through a process like this, the majority of the stakeholders that are going to participate haven't gone through the creation of your criteria or your portfolio. They're seeing it maybe for the first time. And the only way you can communicate to them what does safety mean is from a definition. And a lot of times what we see is the definitions will be written something like, this criterion is used to express the impact of safety elements of a project, which may include X, Y, Z, and would be rated like this, that, or the other. So depending on what level it is, coming up with a definition that very clearly states what that means to a project and how a project scores on that is sometimes the only way you can communicate that. So it's very, very good question, very good point. All right. So I'm going to take off Mildred's here, and I'm going to show you a couple of neat things in this. I can go into each one of the comparisons and see what everyone did. And in the olden days of Decision Lens, people used to do that. They used to sit in the room and go through every single comparison and just pick on people. But we have a better way of picking on people now, which is we've actually mathematically been able to identify some outliers in the process. I shouldn't have said pick on people. So in here, what I'm showing is I'm showing all of the comparisons. This show all is showing all the comparisons that you went through, safety versus economic development, et cetera. I can also show what we call highlights, and highlights are things like low agreement, low alignment, outliers, and clusters of voters. So if I show just the highlights, I can see here that these particular comparisons have specific highlights that you may want to talk about, not pick on. Because everyone's opinion is their own opinion, and it's not wrong. But a lot of times this is used for people that try to maybe game the system. That comes up a lot. One person that says, you know, I think that enhanced connectivity needs to be much higher because I work on connectivity projects and I'm always right. Therefore, everything connectivity related, I'm going to mark it all the way out to a 10 or to, very strong. And I'll let you know that once you get to about 7 to 10 people, no one person can change that based on the way that we do this. But you can call it out here. So I didn't see your answers. I don't know what you voted. Let's hope this works. I'm going to pull up this particular comparison, and it's probably calling on Jessica, who's on the phone. We're not picking on you, Jessica.
Yes, we are.
But I will say, I may want to say, in a review of this, it looks like Jessica voted significantly different than everyone else. And do you want to share why you did so that we can understand what that is? And Jessica, you really don't have to answer if you don't want to, because this was an example.
Yeah, he probably won't answer because he's in a but he may want to respond because we are curious.
Robert is curious. But the idea here being that you can still be an outlier with having your voice heard and having that play into this particular equation. That's an outlier. Sometimes the outliers are pretty evident. Let me see on this one. Yeah, so on here. So this is where, as an owner of the process, so this is a comparison between safety and enhanced connectivity. And our friend Sachin here in the room voted connectivity at a 6, which is significantly different than everyone else. Not wrong, but different.
Sachin likes to hear where he's going. Okay.
So this is where, if you were to do this outside of a group session, as the owner of the portfolio, you can go through this, and you might want to document the results if you don't want to necessarily communicate them like this, right? If you didn't want to call out specific people, you can say that, the majority of the comparisons were a pretty good spread of responses. In the safety versus connectivity, we did have someone who expressed significant concern about connectivity being more important than safety. We're not going to say who that is, but there was someone. Sachin, yeah. But that's kind of where the results come into play and where we can highlight some of these call-outs that you want to talk about. A lot of times in group settings, people actually do want to express their opinion, and I think that's great because it really allows people to understand from their perspective, from the other person's perspective, what they're bringing to the room. And that becomes important if you were to all get behind the results, right? Because there is no wrong answer. The last thing I'm going to show you here in the filters section is the groups. Now, we talked about participant groups when we talked about participants, and I said it would make a little bit more sense later. In the participant groups, I grouped everyone in here into 3 groups. I made you either on the executive team, the project engineer team, or the WebEx team. And honestly, I didn't know you before this today, so hopefully I'm not offending anyone. But I can pull on a group of people and say that people identified from the executive team, which includes Bren, Jeff, John, Judith, Kent, Megan, maybe a couple others, these are the responses that you had. This would be a great thing and what we see people communicate out to their stakeholders, right? This group of people, this is how you voted, versus the project engineers team, which is Allison, Christy, Emily, Frank, etc. This is how you voted, if it was according to your group only. And then people on the WebEx, which we actually had a lot of people, this is great. This is how the WebEx voted. And if you wanted to compare and contrast what those look like, a lot of times that becomes one of the only pieces of communication you need to be able to justify what the weights are that you ended with. Any questions about that?
What is the inconsistency score?
Yeah, so the inconsistency score is very low, which is good. Inconsistency score is how inconsistent people are voting. So if I pulled up a specific person like you, I can see how inconsistent you are. So the easiest
voting, right?
On the voting. So the easiest way is being logically inconsistent. So if you say A is more important than B, and B is more important than C, and then you said C is more important than A, that doesn't make sense. That's the easiest way to explain what it does. Did I do okay, Sanjay? Okay. All right. So that's priorities. And once I'm done with priorities, I would turn it off because I don't want anyone to make any additional changes. I'm not going to send you another email, so I'm considerate like that. And now it's off. Now those weights show up in sensitivity analysis to be able to be used as the weights for your model. And that's something that we're going to go into after the break. So we're going to take a 15-minute break and get back at just before 3. So for those on the phone, we're going to go on mute for about 15 minutes, and we'll see you back at 3 o'clock.